Okay. Oh, there's a lot of people here. Okay. I'd like to thank you all for turning up here on this bit of a blustery day. Yeah, that's me. I'm talking. Yeah, you can twist your chairs around. Today's event's put on by the Goldfields Historical and Art Society that run the Denali Museum, and we have to thank the Moliagul Reserve Committee for making this available, and the Bendigo Amateur Radio Club taken part, and the Bendigo Motorbike. Is that a good enough name?
Yeah.
Right. Going to give a short talk on the early life of Rev John Flynn. It's not particularly interesting, but it's been well researched, and there's some information here that hasn't been available before, and we like to get things right. So it's well known, Rev John Flynn was born here in Moliagul, and his father was the head teacher of the school here. Yeah, and he was, there's a photo out the front with him, his father there. And we've got the monument just down the road here, the Flynn monument, that says John Flynn was born in the house opposite. It's got to be the most deceptive monument you could ever get. The amount of people who read that and then look at the old ruins of the house next door and say, oh, that was John Flynn's house. No. John Flynn was born on that site, but not in that house. That's a later house. So the house that was there previously was the teacher's residence, and later on it was also the Moliagul post office. But in the 1920s, the local guy, Gunda Singh, he was pulling down houses and taking them up to Mildura, which is being developed at the time. So what he was doing, he was just pulling the house to bits and basically putting them on the train as a flat pack up to Mildura and put them back together again. But the house that Flynn had been in was quite a large house, and so when it got up to Mildura, it got used different bits in different spots. And Gunga Singh, he kept the front door. It was a big door, and it's a thick, heavy door, and he kept that for his own house. Yes. But his house got burnt down, and it was Albert Ling. Albert Ling had been born in Moliagul and had shifted to Mildura, and when the fire was there in the 1960s, he managed to save the door that didn't get burnt, and he donated it, and the door from Flynn's house is now in the Denali Museum. So we're here to talk about the early life of John Flynn. 3 of his grandparents all came to Australia, and they all lived in Victoria. Flynn's his father was Thomas Flynn, who was the school teacher here, and the next one back was also Thomas Flynn. He'd come from Ireland, had gone across to Warwickshire in England looking for work, and found Cecilia Mitchell, and they got married. and she was also Irish, and they had a couple of kids there, John Flynn and Thomas Eugene Flynn. Thomas Eugene's the one who became the school teacher here. But then the father died. So Cecilia was left, a widow with 2 young kids. Her brother had already emigrated to Geelong. And so we assume that he sent word back and sponsored her, and she came out with the 2 kids and went straight to Geelong. That was 1857. Now Cecilia and the oldest one, John, stayed in Geelong, but Thomas, he left home at quite a young age, we assume, and by the time he was 18, he got a job as a school teacher at Burringup. And then the next year he moved to Moliagul. He was the head teacher here, but when he arrived, the Moliagul school was across the other side of the creek. It was in a rented room in the Methodist church, not far from the Mount Moliagul Hotel, just a little bit north along the creek there. So Flynn was the teacher when this school was built. Thomas had a mixed upbringing, in the sense of religion was very important to the family. He was born a Catholic, Irish Catholic, born in England, come out to Australia, but in Geelong he went, mainly because it was the closest one to home, he went to a Church of England Sunday school. And then later, when he come to Moliagul, he became a member of the Methodist Church. And Thomas also became a lay preacher for the Methodist Church. And it was during a trip to Denali that he met Rosetta Lester, that later became his wife. Similar backgrounds. Her father was the head teacher at Newbridge School, and she was the sewing mistress at the school. The 2 of them got married in 1876 and they had their children. Eugene, 1877, Rosetta, 1878, John, 1880, and Cecilia, 1883. John apparently was a difficult birth, but Cecilia was worse. She had a lot of complications, and Rosetta died 8 days after giving birth. The really unusual thing for the time was how well this was all organised. They lived here in the schoolhouse. Rosetta's body was taken by cart down to Denali the same day that she died, and put on a train down to Melbourne and buried the next day in the Melbourne General Cemetery. That asks more questions than answers, really. We've got no idea why down to Melbourne. There were no relatives down there. There's no previous relatives in the cemetery. And I guess the efficiency of that we don't really expect in those days, to be able to die in Moliagul one day and get buried in Melbourne the following day, when all your relatives are up here. Cecilia, the baby, was taken to her grandparents at Llanelli, but she was a weak baby and she died at the age of only 15 days. And another awkward question, she was then buried in the Tarnagulla cemetery. No other relatives in that cemetery before or since. Don't have a good answer for why they would have done that. So John Flynn and his brother and his other sister went to the grandparents at Llanelli. This was Anthony and Rosetta Lester. They'd emigrated out to New South Wales along with Rosetta's brothers in the late 1850s, and then come down looking for gold. Anthony didn't do any good on the gold and he got a job as a teacher at Newbridge. Rosetta was also the sewing mistress there, and then they moved to Llanelli 1875. It's not important, but just out of a curiosity, Anthony was also an insurance agent. That's just something that's been left out of all the history books. So John Flynn was only 2 years old when his mother died. He went to his grandparents for a short time and then got moved to his mother's sister, who was Mrs. Cook, up in Maitland in New South Wales. So he had a bit of a mixed childhood. This went on, he went there with his sister. This went for 2 years. Then when he turned 5 and he was ready for school, he got sent back to his father. Thomas had left Moliagul by this stage and he'd gone to Burnt Creek near Denali, and he was the head teacher there, and he was the one that saw the change of name from Burnt Creek School to Bromley School. And then he was transferred to Snake Valley near Ballarat. So some people say that John Flynn went to Bromley. Seems unlikely. It seems like he and his sister went straight to Snake Valley and coincided with when his father got transferred. Now this whole event today was all about the $20 note. The Reserve Bank had decided to issue a new $20 note. It's got John Flynn's picture on it. The old one had John Flynn's picture on it, just a different picture. And they said they were going to do it in October, but they didn't tell us what day. So that's why we picked the end of the month to do this celebration. Now, the first $20 note, 1994 with John Flynn, he replaced Charles Kingsford Smith. Well, he's been forgotten now. The first note had the Flying Doctor plane on it. In fact, we've got a copy in the gazebo there for you to have a look at. Had the pedal radio, first aid chart, and the camels used by the Inland Mission. The new $20 note, it's got some pretty fancy features, security features on it. In fact, I've heard that if you get a big enough stack of them, the little metallic bar in there creates, I'm not sure whether it's a current or a frequency, that can then be traced. So if you've got a hidden stack of them somewhere, yeah, so that's one of the new features of it. Different picture of Flynn, still got the pedal radio, which is important, extract out of one of his books, and there's a picture on the new banknote of the Veld homestead up near Packsaddle in New South Wales. Not necessarily a significant, interesting story, but I thought if we give it to you, you get a little bit of variety and a slightly different account of what you might have heard of John Flynn.
Very interesting.
So we thank you all for coming, and I'm not sure, are we passing on to Neil? No. Yes, somewhere. Hiding up behind me. Good on you, Neil.
Thank you very much, John.
I'm going to pass on to Neil. You can say whatever you want.
Oh, Betty, thanks very much. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to speak to you this morning. My name is Neil Patton. I am the president of the Bendigo Amateur Radio and Electronics Club. We are here at the invitation of the Goldfields Historical Society and the Reserve Committee of Moliagul, and we are very pleased indeed to make ourselves available to you today. The Bendigo Amateur Radio and Electronics Club is committed to what we call technological literacy in society. That is to say, the understanding and informed use of technology. There's no age barriers to this. We educate children, we educate adults, we educate women, we educate the disabled. Anybody who is able to use technology, we are interested in helping them to learn more about it. Our interest today with John Flynn is that 100 years ago, or thereabouts, John Flynn recognised the introduction of two crucial pieces of technology that were new: aviation and radio. He recognised the use of these two technologies in a particular environment, which was the Australian environment, and a particular social need, which was long-distance communication and isolation. Aviation and radio were both able to overcome the tyranny of distance, which isolated people from one another. John Flynn, in our minds, was a visionary who brought these two things together to overcome a critical social requirement of his time. And we recognise him and salute him for that. Our participation today, as John pointed out, is with the new introduction of the new $20 note. We have been issued by the Australian Communications and Media Authority with a special event call sign, VI3FLYNN. That call sign will exist only for 4 days, and the centrepiece of the event is here today. Our amateur radio station uses VI3FLYNN. Right at this moment, we are communicating with people up and down the east coast, and hopefully to New Zealand, across to Tasmania, and if we're very lucky, some overseas countries as well, if the conditions permit. What else can I tell them? Hang on.
That's done.
I beg your pardon?
Flyby.
Oh, yes.
Right, the flyby. Now, the flyby, my last word, and I'm going to say it again, the flyby is up in the air. That is to say, it may very well happen, in which case it will be up in the air, or the conditions are a bit fluctuating, and it may not be the case at all. So we are fingers crossed on the flyby at this stage. That's the latest information we have, but it's out of our hands. So if we hear aircraft going over, everybody stand out in the open and wave. That'd be terrific. Our display today recognises the history of radio over the last century, and in particular the participation of women in radio communications over the last 100 years. This is a story that we're very proud to tell, because it is not well told or often enough told. So the geeky looking guys in the hall are the radio amateurs. They're not that hard to spot. Some of them have got labels and call signs and hats on them, or they're sitting there with headphones on. That's them. feel free to tap them on the shoulder, ask them any question you like. They'll give you an answer, and if you're not happy with that answer, ask another one, you'll get a better one. All right?
Wonderful.
It's a pleasure to speak.
About the QSL card.
Oh yes, thank you. Yes,
Hundreds of amateur radio operators.
that's right. I'm not sure what the number is, but as of Thursday night, we'd made contact with almost 100 amateur radio stations around Australia, in New Zealand, and in Utah, in the United States of America. So this event is getting around the world, and each one of those radio stations will receive what we call a QSL card, that is a confirmation of contact card, which is particular to this event. It is a one-off, and however many contacts we make over the next couple of days, that is all the cards that will ever be issued, except for one, which is a complimentary card being sent to the Royal Flying Doctor Service station up in, I think it's in Broken Hill. They were the people who sent us information and images, which you see displayed in the hall, and we decided that deserves some recognition, so they will be getting a confirmation card as well. I think, having said that, the Historical Society should probably get one as well. But we'll negotiate on that, shall we, Rachel? Yeah, that's good. Okay, I think that was all I had to say. Thank you all again for coming. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay.
Yeah, VK1 Golf Hotel. This is VI3 FLYNN special event call for the release of the new $20 note. And we're transmitting from Moliagul, the Moliagul School, where John Flynn's father taught. So we're in the old school anyway. Yeah, the operator's name this way is David. David's the name there, over.